Hey ladies, are you a conservative woman just trying to find a podcast that isn't speaking propaganda right now? I get it. I'm with you. I'm here for you. We all need some encouragement and godly wisdom to remind us we are on the right track, to remind us of our identity as God's daughter. That's why I'm here, to help you grow spiritually so that no matter what life or the world throws at you these days, you cannot be shaken. It's here you're going to hear stories of women who have become victors where they were once victims. You're going to hear God's word to help you stand strong and push back the darkness. You're going to hear wisdom that is not of this world to keep you focused on Jesus. I don't know where you're at today, but I do know God is meeting you right there. He wants to bring you closer to Him. Throughout this podcast, you're going to hear bits and pieces of the pit, the trials, the difficult seasons the Lord has brought me through, so you know you're not alone. We're going to walk together and grow in our relationship with Jesus, because really that's what it's all about anyway. So join me as we seek truth, share overcomer stories, and just learn what it is to lean into the Lord. God is good. He has a good plan for our lives, and we can trust Him. My name is Meredith. Welcome to Guiding God's Daughters. Let's get real and go deep. Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith, host of Guiding God's Daughters, Get Real and Go Deep. And I am so excited today to finally have a guest on that I have been wanting to have for ages. She's pretty special. We met, I don't even know how many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, shortly after her story began, which she will tell you about, but we've always kind of had this connection and just have known we're supposed to stay connected and kind of help young people not have to go through what she has gone through, and parents. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we will kind of get into the story and all that, but she is going to, I know she's going to impact you, and I just pray that her story blesses you today. So Becky, why don't you tell us your story, or tell us about you and then your story.
Okay, sure. Well, thanks, Meredith, first of all, for having me on here. I know it's only seemed like a couple of years ago that we met, but it's actually been almost 7 years. I know that was the first time that I publicly spoke about this, and I think you were there that night. So, yeah. So my name is Becky Savage, and I am from Northern Indiana. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for almost 30 years, believe that or not. And then I went back to school, crazy me, to get a master's degree in nursing education. And I taught at a local university for many years. Nursing students. So that was a lot of fun engaging with young kids, so to speak. So, yeah, so most of my career has been spent in education and in the healthcare field.
Got it. Which you and I talked about over coffee the other week was kind of no mistake in how your story has played out. So why don't you tell the listeners about your story and what happened?
Sure. Well, our story started back on June 14th of 2015, so almost 8 years ago, coming up, that our two older sons and myself were attending graduation parties. And I went to a couple of the graduation parties with them and then let them go to a couple more. And I, went home. I think I actually went to the grocery store, came home and started to unload groceries. My kids came home, checked in with me, and ate and said, we're going back out. We're going to some more graduation parties, which in our community, it's a really tight-knit community. Even though they went to a large high school, they had a lot of tight-knit friends. And during graduation season, it is like one graduation party after the other. So that wasn't an unusual thing. So they went, and they came home shortly after midnight. I remember hearing them come in and coming out of our bedroom and looking over our banister upstairs and making eye contact with them. As a parent, you're like, this is great. They're home. You kind of have the, check that off. Then you go to bed. And my boys went into the kitchen and started making snacks, and that was it. The next morning, I remember it was a weekend. It was a Sunday morning, and I was going around doing household chores. I think that morning it was laundry that I was doing at the time, walking in and out of the boys' bedrooms, picking up their clothes that they, threw on the floor, never picked up or anything. And I remember walking in Jack's room and, I was looking at him, and I remember thinking in my mind to myself, what a beautiful child. He just was like, he looked like an angel. I remember that thought. And, many of us as parents have sat there and watched our kids sleep before. It's, kind of that peaceful thing. And went around his room, was picking up laundry, talking to Jack, it's time to get up, we're not going to sleep the day away, so to speak. Before I really, had a split second of panic where I was like, is he breathing? Is it what, how sometimes I'm just like, oh my gosh, what? And I'm like, don't be so silly.
Mm-hmm.
But I walked over and shook him to awaken him. And, those next few moments truly, still haunt me. I am a nurse. I've been trained in saving people. And, that moment in time was, Jack was lifeless. He was just laying there. I remember grabbing my cell phone, calling 911, coming back to his room and doing CPR, picked him up out of his bed and laid him on the floor and did CPR. I mean, it's like things that as a parent, you can't even imagine you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember, paramedics finally had came and, took over resuscitation attempts. And I remember, one of the paramedics had left, had got up during the, resuscitation attempts. And I remember screaming at him, like, why are you leaving him? Where are you going? But what I didn't know is that he was responding to another 911 call out of my house, which was from my basement. In the meanwhile, while I was calling for help with Jack, I was hollering for Nick because I knew that Nick had been home with friends. And they heard me screaming and they went to awaken Nick and found Nick in the same condition as Jack. And they had called 911.
Mm.
So, we didn't know. I didn't know at the time what was going on. In my mind, I'm thinking, was there a gas leak in my house? Like what could possibly happen? Having both of my boys overdose wasn't even on my radar. What we now know is that they were at graduation parties where they were participating in underage drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point during their time there were pills that were offered to them and they decided to take that pill. And unfortunately, it cost them their life. I know it's still hard to believe that that's my story, it's just.
Yeah, the chills. It's like I have chills and I have no words. And it just is, it's every parent's worst nightmare. And it happened twice. And I just cannot even imagine. And tragic. And I'm so incredibly sorry. What do you say?
Yeah. It's one of those, it's one of those things it's horrific. I literally wish this wasn't my story. Mm-hmm. Wish this wasn't. But then again, I wouldn't ever wish this on somebody else. So, I really feel like this is part of our story for a reason. And we've recognized that. And so we're trying to really find our purpose in that and use that to help other people and, potentially save other people's, save lives in the process.
What a blessing. I'm curious how long, obviously grief, I deal with other people with grief all the time and it doesn't all of a sudden go away. You're not like, oh, I'm over it. And so I'm curious kind of where in your grief you guys kind of, or maybe how long or where it was that you were like, you know what, we have to create the foundation or we need to do something. What was it that kind of shifted in you that made you realize like, okay, this is bigger than us?
Yeah. Well, I remember, in grief, I get asked that a lot. And I truly believe grief isn't something you get over, it's something you learn to live with.
Yep.
And some days grief is bigger than you are, and you just take it one day at a time. But I remember during that week that the boys had passed away, we were at the boys' public viewing.
Mhm.
And my youngest at the time was 11. And he, during that week before that, it was a Friday. The boys passed away on that Sunday, and Friday was their viewing. But during that week, um, he wanted my credit card. He wanted to order some of those rubber bracelets that had the boys' names on it. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I remember giving him my credit card. And I remember them showing up like the next day or something crazy. And I'm thinking, I have no idea how much I just paid for that, overnight shipping. But we had those, and he wanted to pass them out. It was so important to him. He wanted to pass those out to the boys' friends.
Mm.
So he had those at the viewing, and I remember he came back to me with this wad of money. And when I say wad, I mean like a wad of money.
Wow.
And he's like, Mom, you'll never believe somebody just gave me $100 for one of those bracelets. And I'm like, wait, what, Matt?
What?
When it registered, I'm like, Matt, no. You're not supposed to sell them. We're giving them away. He's like, no, Mom. He goes, because we're going to do something good for Nick and Jack. And we're going
Oh,
to do something good with this money for Nick and Jack. And that was the seed
wow.
that was planted. And at that point, you have so much other stuff going on. You're just like,
Yeah.
and at some point, as a parent too, you're just like, you have to let them grieve in their own way.
Mhm.
And this was his way, and I wasn't going to tell him it wasn't the right way. So it happened. And I remember that seed being planted. And we took a good year before we did not speak publicly about this, because it was we could have, but we didn't. We wanted to focus on our family, and this was our grief and our I was so wrapped up in making sure that my other boys were okay, and that they still deserve to have a good life. And I really wanted to make sure that they got all the resources and everything that they could to help with that grief process for them. But we were invited to speak locally, and I think that's where I met you,
Mhm.
about alcohol, underage drinking. It was like a town hall. And I remember thinking, well, our boys were underage drinking. And I'm sure that played a big part into the choices that they made, because we all know you can't make good choices while drinking.
Yeah.
And underage drinking is no different.
Mhm.
So we went, and they said, maybe 15, 20 people will come. And I'm like, okay, because up until that point, I'd not ever done public speaking, so to speak, other than with my students. So we went, and there were over 200 people. I remember that showed up, and I was so like, oh my gosh, I cannot. I'm just like, I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? I don't even know what I'm going to say. And I just remember having a peace about me,
Mhm.
and the words just came, and I just said what I guess I was supposed to say. And, we got through it. And then one of our friends was a local television host. And said, if we do an interview, you will be the first one. And so we immediately went with her, and we did an interview. And that kind of just started, I guess, the ball going. Like, we started getting calls from local high schools. Can you please come tell your story to our students? They need to hear this.
Mhm.
And then, more local radio stations and TV stations, and then national. We started getting interview requests from, Nancy Grace and the Today Show and Megyn Kelly and Fox News and CNN. Just really, this was at the cusp. You think about it, in 2015, that's really at the cusp of the spike, for really all these overdoses. They were going up then, but not like they are today.
Mm.
And that's kind of what, my husband and I were thinking, maybe this is what we're supposed to use that money for, to start a foundation, and do something good with that, leave, uh, do something good in Nick and Jack's name. Their work here on earth, physically is done, but they can still reach people and change lives and touch lives, through us. So that's
Mm.
kind of how we started the 525 Foundation. So,
Oh, oh, this the part with the most incredible part is that it was your other son. So it's like just the just wow. I mean, it's like he must have a little entrepreneurial spirit in him because if that
I would say, yeah, I would say so. But it's kind of like those things like out of the mouths of babes, right?
yeah.
Like, you just don't, and sometimes you don't even realize what the seed's been planted when it's planted until
Mhm.
later on. You're like, oh my gosh, remember when Matt said XYZ, whatever? And you're like, that was the seed, and it just needed time to sit there and, grow a little bit before it really became a beautiful flower, so to speak,
Yes,
right?
but it's like he had to it's like you just had to see it, yeah, like you said, and let it be. And I absolutely love that you guys took a year to just love on your family
Hmm.
because that is so important to, it's like just to re-steady the ground, just to just
Yeah,
rebuild the foundation, even though it looks different. And it's just, what are we going to do with this and focus on them? It's not funny, but funny. Friday, I don't know if you saw on Facebook, my husband's car blew up, and like
oh, I did. In flames.
yeah, flames, big
Yes,
flames, 12
yes,
12 inches from our house, and
that was
thankfully the
terrifying.
Lord protected our house. But here's the thing: is my husband's like, yeah, let's keep Ellie home. It's a little event, but it's something. I mean, she's 3.5, where it was like she needs to be with us. Like she just
Yeah,
needs to be surrounded with love. Just a little event, but surrounded with love. And I think that is so important because then out of that love, you guys can go out and just shine their light. And that's just a beautiful thing. Because some people I think are just like, I need to do this, and they kind of make whatever that is kind of the fix. And it's like,
yeah.
you guys didn't do
Well,
it.
yeah, and there's no way. I mean, and I know, I remember thinking, there is nothing I can do to change what happened, the outcome. I can sit in my room and then beat my head up against the wall, and it's still not going to change the end result. Or I can focus on things that I can change, and that is, my other two boys having a beautiful life and knowing that this doesn't make their life any less important. And, talking and making a difference in the lives of other people, our family, our friends, our, people we don't know in the name of Nick and Jack. And
Mhm.
I think to me, that sounded like a better thing to do than
Mhm.
beating my head up against the wall, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right.
How can I approach this situation with a glass half full instead of a glass half empty? Because like my other it's like your other boys have a whole lot of life more left to live, and so do you. And it's like,
And, they're watching us too. I remember thinking, they're watching how we handle this. And if I were to respond that way, then maybe that could have been theirs instead of us, moving through that. And still, we still hurt and we still grieve at times. And that's okay. We talk about it, we still bring them up every day in conversation, like, oh
mhm,
my goodness, remember when,
mhm,
Jack did this or Nick did that. And, we find where we laugh more now than we do cry. And, that is, that's love. Love is grief, and you don't have grief without deep love. So it's okay to grieve.
yes, and it's okay if you just. I had one of those days the other weekend where I always say my book on grief is going to be called "Duh, It's Grief," because I'm
Yeah,
like, why am I moving slow? Why am I? And it's like, oh, pardon me, I'm going through grief.
yeah. You can't explain it, and there are no books that tell you how to get through it.
No.
Everybody's different, but just recognizing that is what it is. I think you can maybe cope with it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you told me the other week about how you go to some of these. You went to an overdose. So did you do something where you saw a bunch of moms who'd lost their children to overdoses or something?
Yeah, so it was a mom's group I was speaking at in Boston, and
Okay.
it was just so sad, like, that we were all there for, because we'd lost kids, and probably about, I would say 90% of the moms in that room had lost kids to overdose. And it was just, it was sad, but yet it was uplifting to have that support of other moms feeling the same way like understanding how you feel and having that love and support from them. It was just very, very impactful.
Yeah, I bet it was. It's like I'm not, because it's such an isolating, I mean, grief is such an isolating thing, but what you went through is so isolating, and I cannot even imagine what that felt like. So affirming. And so were most of the women there kind of trying to walk through it, or was it like both?
I think it was kind of like a celebration of moms,
Okay.
so to speak. But you know, everybody's at a different point in their journey, and I think that's kind of where everybody in that room was. Some may have just lost their child, some might have, been 20 years, but you still feel that profound grief. And I think just knowing that it's okay and you're not alone. And, not that you would ever want someone else to be where you're at, but knowing that there are people out there like that, and just understanding that it's like hard to explain the feeling until you've been through it. And then when you've been through it, you will never forget that feeling. Like it's because it's with you forever. And, I think losing anybody is, is sad, and can hurt. I think there's a different element to it when it's your child.
Right.
It's just a different, not saying it's worse or better, it's just a different kind of hurt. And having that group of people around you that, understood that, I think was what was so impactful about that.
That's awesome. And I can imagine them hearing you. It was just, it's like when you first shared your story. It's like then you said it. It's like sometimes all we do is get the story out with another person, or like you did, and it's like to get it out, and it's like, okay, here we go. This is it. Here we go. People need to hear it.
And this is what we're supposed to do. I mean, I never thought, again, like this is something I would ever choose to do. Like this was never on my list of things when I was young that I would write down what I want to be when I grow up. I never on there was, public speaker, advocate, any of that, author, none of that. And it's just, I think when we listen, to where we're supposed to be, things happen. I mean, it was harder for me to stay doing what I was doing after the boys passed away. And I remember talking to one of my colleagues, and she's like, maybe God's trying to point you in a different direction and you're just not listening. And I remember thinking, maybe you're right. And maybe I need to just listen. And when I did, and I was pulled one way, and things just started happening. And I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be. I get asked all the time, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's by the grace of God, because I didn't know how to fill out 501c3 paperwork. I didn't know. Things just happen. And, it seemed like we were in the places where we were supposed to be, to meet the right people for this or that. And, it just seemed to happen. And we just had to learn to accept it and go with it, and do our job with that, and use that as our purpose to help further that.
Right. So God really laid out the road for you. You just had to walk it, and that's what you're still doing, and that's really all we can do. But I think what is so powerful about, how it's taken a couple years for me to get you on here and for me to get my stuff together on the podcast, but the timing of it is crazy because of the fentanyl crisis in our country. And it is nuts.
It's getting really, really scary right now. I do a lot of work with the DEA. We are very involved in their take back days. We really spearhead those events here in town
Mhm.
and really get involved with that. I've been involved in a lot of their family summits, been a speaker at several of their events, just, really involved with what they do, and we get a lot of information with them. And I remember when we first started hearing about fentanyl, I was like, being a nurse, I'm like, fentanyl, like, because we used to use that in the hospital,
Mhm.
but it's a different kind of fentanyl. It's not, the kind of fentanyl that is manufactured in the laboratory under strict regulations. The fentanyl that we're starting to see in every community across our country is fentanyl that is being manufactured in non-regulated um, areas. So it's, precursors are coming in from other countries and then they're being manufactured and brought into our country in the form of pills, powders, liquid, vapes. It's just about in everything. There is, I know the DEA just put out an alert that 6 out of every 10 pills that are confiscated are laced with a deadly dose of fentanyl. It's terrifying. Fentanyl right now is in everything. And it's really something that we all need to be talking to our loved ones about. Nothing is safe. There is no room for error. There are kids, we can't go out and make mistakes anymore because one pill literally can kill.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw some article about like the rise in like toddler and little one's death because a parent who is using it leaves it out and the little one picks it up like it's candy and it's gone.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are dying from fentanyl overdoses don't even know that fentanyl is in what they're doing. Fentanyl they're finding in vapes. Well, how many kids? We have a crisis right now with kids, middle school, high school, and college age kids with vaping. It's a huge thing, you know, and a lot of this, there could be fentanyl in that stuff. Marijuana. I know we're surrounded by states that have legalized marijuana.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of marijuana that people are buying on the streets are coming laced with fentanyl. A lot of people are, well, why are they putting fentanyl? They're killing their customers. Well, they're, trying to create more business for them because they're
Oh.
trying to get people addicted. And opioid, which is what fentanyl is an opioid, is a very, very, very addictive
Mhm.
um, drug.
Yep.
And when people might be addicted to it and not even know it, but they'll know that they feel better when they go buy stuff from so and so because his stuff makes them feel better than so and so stuff. So
Oh.
they're trying to create a community of people who are addicted to opioids.
I was wondering why
And
there's so many of them in my town. My husband and I drive by, we're like, what? They're like on top of each other. And
yeah,
that makes
well,
sense.
yeah, so if they, well, the legal marijuana places, they can't sell fentanyl.
Okay, good. So what are the illegal,
So
where do they get
the
it from?
illegal ones, this is where, well, it's coming, a lot of it's coming from over the border, down, southern area coming through. But, realistically, any kid that has a cell phone is in harm's way because a lot of kids are purchasing um, medications, fake pills through apps now, Snapchat, I know, TikTok, different things like that. I've seen different social media avenues where kids can order something through there and it be
Oh,
delivered right to their house before a parent may not even know it. So this is why, conversations, when we go across the country, we speak to parents too. Conversations are so important and conversations can save a life.
right. And I think because like marijuana is so whatever accepted these days. I mean, when I was when I was in my 20s, it was like, oh my gosh, that person smokes pot. Now it's like, you walk in any store and half the time I think I get high walking by someone. But
Well,
yeah,
it's different though. I hate to say it's different than when we were kids because I remember my parents always saying, it's different. We had to walk to school both ways uphill, that
right.
whole thing. But but it is different because, the concentration of the marijuana and stuff that kids are smoking is so much higher than it was back then. Now it's just not smoking marijuana, it's the wax, where they strip it out of the marijuana leaf and it's so intensely concentrated, so it's just different. And, this is why conversations need to be
Yeah.
had, it affects their brains. Kids' brains are still developing until they're 24, 26 years old. So every time you introduce a different chemical into your body, it's rewiring different parts of your brain. And so it's just so important that we have those conversations with kids so they know what's happening and that we educate ourselves as parents and
Yes.
and that we know what's going on out there so that we can have those intelligent conversations with our kids.
So what do you say when a kid says, oh, marijuana is not a big deal. I'm not having this stuff that's laced with fentanyl, because it's so accepted. How as a parent do you talk to your kid about that? Do you,
Well, the average that, let's say Johnny gets marijuana from Jimmy
yeah.
down on the corner. Well, Johnny doesn't know that before Jimmy got it, probably 11 to 12 other people have had their hands on that. So, and each person wants to make money because they're all in this for money. So they're all cutting it with who knows what and mixing it to make it a higher quantity. So I would tell Johnny, unless he knows every single one of those people individually, then you don't know where your stuff's coming from. I've heard kids say, well, I know where I'm getting it from. He would never do that to me.
Right.
You don't know the other, hands that has transpired through, and it's not worth the risk.
That is a very good practical example of,
Yeah.
because I know some kids are like, oh, well, I have what is it, the medical card or whatever, and I get it there. Okay, they get it there, but the majority of kids on campuses, they're not getting it there. So,
Yeah, and it's really, you can't trust anybody
no,
anymore with that because, somebody might, I'm getting it from my roommate. My roommate would never do that. But where'd your roommate get it? And that person get it. And it's just not worth it. There's no room for error right now.
yeah, you're not looking at the source, and you're not going to know the source. So don't even try to tell me that you know the source.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very scary right now. And it's not worth the risk.
So you said liquid, it's in liquid too? I mean, are people like dropping it in drinks or?
No, more so like vapes.
Oh,
They found some in vape pens that have been laced with that. Marijuana has been laced, cocaine has been laced. We're
mm,
hearing about a lot of that. I know there's a high risk of a lot of cocaine on some college campuses, and
mm,
some of those have been laced with fentanyl as well. So, yeah, I mean, really any paper you open up anymore,
I know.
you can see tragedies in there. This is something back in 2015 when my kids passed away. That was a record year at 57,000 people had died that year,
Mm,
which was disgusting. Now we're at 109,000 people that have died in the last 12 months, and it's not getting any better. This is almost like 300 people a day that are dying from an overdose. An overdose is preventable and it's senseless. It's a senseless death. And, it's just something that we all need to start talking about and we all need to take action so that we can stop this because we are all going to be intimately affected by this. We're going to know somebody directly or indirectly where it's going to happen. And we need to stop this.
mm. Woo!
Yeah,
It
I
is.
know.
It's just it's crazy. I don't. And then you think about the kids that are going in because I before this all kind of took off. You hear about like, oh, a kid on a football team has to have surgery, and then he takes an opioid that he gets in the emergency room and gets addicted to that. But this is a whole other level of it being, just everywhere. And I'm curious if there's stats on kind of how COVID and the isolation has kind of made this worse, and
Yeah, I know there are stats out there. I don't know them offhand, but I know that there has been a rise in overdose deaths. There has been a rise in mental health crisis.
Oh,
There
yes.
has been a rise in, depression. There has been so most of there has been a rise in all that, and all that stuff can be interrelated. Sometimes people self-medicate to soothe how they're feeling and things like that. So it's really important that we get mental health we get people mental health access to mental health care, and that they can get so that they're not trying to self-medicate themselves. And it's important that we all, we have resources and heightened awareness on what is going on in our communities so that we can alleviate some of those risks.
Right, exactly. So tell me how Narcan plays into all this. So can Narcan, tell me?
Yeah, so Narcan is the antidote to an opioid overdose. So, and what it does is opioids, when you take too much, will log onto your receptors in your brain, and it suppresses your central nervous system, which suppresses your breathing, your heart rate, all that, which eventually you overdose and you die. When you have Narcan, Narcan pulls those receptors off the cell, essentially, so that you're able to breathe. Your central nervous system is able to work. And Narcan now is available just about in every community. You can go to your health department. There's a lot of different agencies around that have it available. And it doesn't cure somebody. It doesn't cure anybody who has an addiction. It does not cure. The only thing it does is it keeps them alive so that they can get the help that they need. It's, kind of like CPR, CPR is not going to cure your heart condition, but it can keep you alive until you can get the help that you need. And we're very fortunate. We have in our community a lot of Narcan available. We have a vending machine at St. Joe County Police Department that is stocked. No questions asked. People can go in and get a dose and carry it. I encourage everybody to carry a dose of Narcan because you never know when we're going to come in contact with somebody who may need it. I have heard story after story after story of people that we have trained that have used it in situations that they never thought they would be in. Whether it be a college roommate, walking down the street and basically tripping over somebody who was in the midst of an overdose. So, being a nurse, especially if I am ever able to save somebody's life and I have the capability to do that, I'm going to do that. Yeah. It's not for me to decide who lives or who dies. Yeah. So that's what Narcan is. And that right now is the only antidote until people can get the help that they need.
Right. So you said something about how you weren't always kind of an advocate for it. And obviously you see the other side.
This is, I've been a nurse for 30 years and, it goes back to the stigma.
Yeah.
Way back when I worked in a hospital, you had Narcan available for, if somebody had got too much morphine when, from chest pain or whatever, things like that. And it goes back, to the education, and, back then, we did stigmatize people who were drug addicts and people who had, addiction issues. And I think the more you educate yourself and the more you're in the know, the more you understand that they're not doing this to themselves. Like this is truly a disease And it is something that we need to help and support people through. You know, you will do anything to help keep somebody alive. And the people who have substance abuse issues are no different than anybody else, you know, and their lives are just as important as anybody else. And that's why, you know, when I talk about the Narcan, sometimes we do hear some negative things about that. And again, if I have the capability to keep somebody alive, I'm I'm an advocate for that, as I am for other things that keep people alive and help them. You know, and I'm not here to say one's worse than the other. You know, I want, you know, everybody to live a healthy life and a happy life, you know.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, being a recovering addict myself, it is, addiction is so stigmatized. Mental health is still so stigmatized. And I always say it's just because you can't see it doesn't mean that you don't have a massive issue in your brain and you need to address it. You know, your neurons aren't connecting and
Right.
addiction,
And
you
I
know.
think the more we talk about it, and the more understanding people will get about it, you know, and realize that, you know, Meredith just didn't wake up one day and say, you know, I'm gonna, you know, change my career and I'm gonna go be, you know, addicted to whatever. You know, it doesn't happen like that. And um, we do need to talk about it. And the only way we're gonna break that stigma um, and the only way we're going to make a dent in what's going on in our communities is to break that stigma and to talk about it and for everybody, you know, to do their part.
Yes, I agree. And it kind of makes me think, which makes me kind of move into the binge drinking on college campuses, because when I was, I don't know if we talked about this or not, but when I was at Notre Dame, I mean, my third weekend at Notre Dame, I had tried out for the rowing team, and I drank some concoction, and I was in the hospital, and the doctor was like, you have an addict, you're gonna have a problem," and I was like, "No, I'm fine." But my roommates didn't know what to do with me because they all just thought I drank too much. And it's like there's so many facets to it where like college kids aren't educated. I mean, I can't tell you how many girls I've mentored, college students that have said, I had to help my friend. I had to carry my friend down the street, or I blacked out. And, I went and spoke at one of the dorms because they had so many girls black out at this dance. And all they wanted to talk about was how many calories they were eating, or how many is okay for me to drink, and nobody's really talking about that maybe there's a genetic disposition to the addiction of the alcohol, or maybe there is trauma that somebody's had and nobody talks about it. They just want to cover it with, oh, just do a 6-week class, and that doesn't fix it. And I um I just it doesn't mean that every kid on every college campus has a problem.
Yeah. Um, no, but everybody potentially could. You
Yes.
know, there's been research to say, you know, again, our brains, kids' brains are still developing until they're 24 to 26 years old. Boys sometimes takes a little bit longer than girls, but and when you're introducing that a chemical, which alcohol is, it chemically changes the brain
Mhm.
every time they do it. And binge drinking is, I think it's the like latest statistic I read said something about 92% of the drinking that goes on in college campuses is binge drinking.
Mhm.
And the first 6 weeks of a kid being on campus is the most risky for that binge drinking, which is terrifying as a parent, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and so again, I think a lot of it is we need to talk to our kids about that.
Mhm.
And we also need to realize that our kids are not going to be perfect, you know, and we need to allow space for our kids to make some mistakes or to be able to reach out for us for help that we can help them. I have a lot of kids that I talk to, and I always tell them, you know, have an exit plan. You know, if you're somewhere or you need, you know, or know what you're going to do if you're in a situation. Be a good friend if your friend is in that situation. You know, don't have a person you can call. Don't feel bad about calling your parents in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
or an aunt or somebody you feel close with. And if we're that parent that they do call, or that aunt or that family friend, then we need to be there for them, and not, so many kids have said, my parents have picked me up. They said, no matter what, they'll come get me. But then I get in the car and they're screaming at me the whole way home. And then I'm grounded from my phone and whatever. And I'm like, parents, do you think they're ever going to call you again in that situation?
Nope.
Absolutely not.
Mm.
But I understand, as a parent, you're just, beside yourself when, something like that happens.
Mhm.
However, that's not the time or the place to have that conversation.
Mhm.
Am I going to have a conversation with my kid? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But it's going to be the next day, and it's going to be, frequent, quick chats. It's not going to be a 3-hour long dissertation about something that they've tuned me out after 5 seconds,
Mhm.
and it's going to be a constant thing that I'm having conversations. I still have conversations with my kids all the time. They're, every time I talk to them, we have quick conversations about stuff. And that's what research shows, is that frequent, quick, short conversations are the conversations that work. So,
That's good.
yeah.
And I think a lot of it is, we're like Mike and I guess have kind of been blessed to have an experience where we can say to our kids, like, I'm not here to judge you. You know, I understand where you're coming from, but it's like, you listen to what's going on, and you
And
just,
that's a skill. Listening is a skill, a
yeah,
learned skill.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. It is very hard, especially when you want to have the parental, response of,
And you
you
have
know,
that emotion and you're like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
yeah. My dad used
Oh,
to always say, because his mom was an alcoholic, and he always used to say, "It's in our family, Meredith. Don't do it, don't do it." And then he would see me hosting tailgates in Notre Dame, partying like crazy, and he would just kind of give me this shamed look. But when I called him, when I finally was ready to get sober, and he was like, "Oh," it's like I had to want to get better. And I think
wow.
sometimes when these parents make it about disciplining the kid to do it perfectly, and it's like, no, your kid has to live and learn and make the dumb decisions to realize that they're not helping them, you know?
Yeah. Well, none of us are perfect.
No.
And I, in my mind, feel like if my kids do call me, or anybody's kid calls them, I'm thankful that I have that opportunity that they can call me, and
Yes.
that it's not like my last, with Nick and Jack,
Yep.
you know, because at least, they're able to call me and we're able to have a conversation and talk about, whatever it is. Whether anything, if I get a call in the middle of the night, my reaction is going to be much different than it probably would have been in the past,
Hmm.
because I know that it's an opportunity.
Yes. Yes. And that's, I think, probably something that all parents need to know. It's an opportunity to speak life and to be present and to listen to your kid, and to really kind of get a window into where they're at. I'm always like, what's going on in their heart, because it's never just about that thing. If they've drank too much one night and they feel awful, it's like, what's going on? What's really going on? You
Yeah.
know?
And sometimes, kids, peer pressure, we have
Oh,
to really, peer pressure is, we have to, and I think as parents, we don't understand how hard it is for them to go against that grain of peer pressure. And really, we need, the more we have conversations with them, the more we give them facts, the more we give them resources, different things, the more tools we're giving them to get out of those situations.
hmm
We're teaching them refusal skills. That was something that I was out in Florida, and they are teaching kids down there. I'm like, this is fantastic. They're teaching them how to refuse when
Right.
they're being offered stuff.
Yeah.
Whether you act like you didn't hear it and somebody said, hey, Becky, you want to try this? Well, I keep walking. And they're like, hey, Becky. I'm like, oh, wait, what? Oh, I didn't hear you. No, I got to go. My mom called. That quick 5 seconds that I had to think about it could have given me the opportunity to come up with a white lie, or something like I got to leave. So teaching our kids different things, different refusal skills, different tools to get out of situations, can help them with some of that peer pressure.
Yeah, it gives them courage to kind of step away from it, because it is, especially on college campuses. It's like if you're not drinking or doing whatever, it's like you're weird. What's wrong? Why aren't you doing this? And I think that when I ended up in the hospital that sophomore year, it was like I think I knew I had a problem, but I there was nothing for me to do with it, and drinking was the culture, so I just kept doing it, because of the peer
Yeah.
pressure.
Well, and that's what I think we just have to, you know, help our kids understand that, especially in high school. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that show, kids think in high school everybody's, smoking marijuana or everybody's drinking, and the statistics show that not everybody is, but that's all that we seem to be focused on, so to speak. So, there's a lot of positive reinforcement to focus on, all the kids who aren't doing it, and highlighting that and stuff. But I think it's just our natural tendency to focus on everybody's, because that's what we think we see or we know. And yeah, it's, yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it, Meredith?
Yes, it is. It's
All
like
of this stuff out there.
it is. It's like a beast with tentacles, the alcohol, the fentanyl, it's like all of these just things that are just, and I don't know, it's just such important stuff to talk about. And I think parents, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I think parents need to hear it more. I think parents need to, be real about it. And kids need to be real about it. And um I mean, I know my stepdaughter, I think she was a year below your son, the younger one, and at Penn. Yeah, and I remember
Oh, okay.
Sammy Shaler, and I remember we were standing outside. We were like, I don't know, cutting the grass or something, and she came and told us. And I mean, I still remember where I was the moment we found out. And I know it's impacted her life tremendously, and all the kids that were, you know,
Yeah. It's
around her.
just, one of those things that you just never, expect to happen, and uh, yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate that it's continuing to happen 300 times a day. It's just, um, it's just one of those things that we have to do better, and we have to talk about it. And um,
My one last question was, like when you've been out there going to different schools all over the country, and are there any, I know you sometimes post kind of how people are impacted or kids are impacted. I was just curious if you had any one or two or any story of how your foundation has changed people's lives.
Well, I kind of think that that's what keeps me going is the messages and our parents, I know when parents come and see me talk, usually I'll do a community event after I've talked to the students, and the parents will say, I'm only here because my kids made me come because they heard you this morning and said, Mom, you've got to go hear this person speak. And then they'll come up and they say, oh my goodness, we're going to go home and we're going to clean out our medicine cabinet, or we're going to, have a conversation. And there's always those kind of conversations that really, make your heart smile.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's the messages that, or the conversations that happen outside of that, the private messages
Mm-hmm.
that are sent to me, like people who have reached out to get help because of hearing our story, and our kids whose prom plans have changed because they had plans to do, XYZ at prom. And then after I came and talked, they, said our prom plans changed because of your talk.
Yeah.
We were going to go out and do XYZ, and then we changed it, just things like that. It's like, we'll never know if we, the impact we would have had, it potentially is life saved. And in my mind, that's what I have to think. And, rest assured that Nick and Jack are still making a difference here in this world, just in a different way than what we had thought, right?
Yeah, exactly. you guys are, it's like you guys are all still together on the same mission, just, you know,
Yeah, there's
some sweet
still in my heart.
angels.
Yeah,
Oh, of
just
course they are.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, incredible story, incredible what I know God is doing through you guys and will continue to do through you guys. And I just pray that more people get blessed, you know, by the awareness you're spreading, and people
Thank
make
you.
different choices. Parents, kids. I love kind of the, I don't know how to say, the intergenerational message of your foundation. It's, you know, it,
Everybody can be impacted, and by it, grandparents even as well. We have grandparents that reach out to us or, will come to our talks because, they have pills in their home and they want to know how to safely dispose of those or how they should, what they should do when their grandkids come over. And, I'm like, talk about it. Don't hide anything, but know where your meds are, and it should be okay. Don't hide anything from me. I think when people start hiding stuff and they think then, oh, am I supposed to get into that stuff? So, but put it away, and when you're done with it, dispose of it properly.
yeah. And speaking of the disposal, I always love when I see your, what do you call them? Like,
Our permanent drop boxes, our
yeah.
drop stop program. Yeah.
Yeah, I love when I see them. I'm always like, "Go Becky!" Whenever.
Yeah, well, I was always at the grocery store, being a mother of four
Yep.
boys, and I'm like, what a great, place to have those. It's just right by the front door. Martin's was so generous and let us put them right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of serves as a reminder, people coming in the store, people leaving the store. But yet it's convenient,
Mm-hmm.
when people if they just want to run in and drop stuff off, they can be proud of those boxes. So they're
Mm-hmm.
collecting lots of pills, so that's a good thing. Our
Yeah.
community is really starting to make it a habit in cleaning out their stuff, so that's a good thing.
Well, yes, that's awesome. It also shows that you're impacting our immediate community. So, um, we are blessed by your impact. So, all right. Well, tell me. I'll close it up. Where can people find you? And then tell us about your book. She's actually written a book
Oh
too.
yeah. Yep. So this was my COVID project. I don't know if this is video or not, but
Yeah.
so it's called, our book is called #OneChoice, How 10 Seconds Can Change Your Life. And I wrote it really over COVID. I wasn't able to get out to the schools and, kind of tell our story, but yet knew the need was still there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of put our story down in a book form, but it's different than most because it's told from Nick and Jack's perspective, which I love because I mean, let's face it, kids don't really listen to parents, right? They're not going to listen to me, but they'll listen to their peers. And so it's just, Nick and Jack telling their story, and then their voices end the night that they pass away, and then mine takes over. And yeah, so it was pretty hard to write, but it was pretty I don't know, almost therapeutic, so to speak.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be cliche or anything, but it did. It was just kind of, I felt really proud of the project when it was done. And there's resources in the back for parents and teachers and kids, different emojis that kids are using for drug language and social media and different things. So that is available on Amazon. But we can be found on social medias. We have the not TikTok yet, but Instagram, Facebook, and then our website, which is 525foundation.org.
Yeah, and if some people may not, I mean, I know what the numbers mean, but people who don't know what the numbers mean, do you want to tell them what that means?
Yeah, so Nick and Jack were avid hockey players. Actually, all four of my boys were. And that was their hockey numbers. 5 was Jack's hockey number and 25 was Nick's hockey number. And it's just kind of a way to bring them along with us on this journey. So it's the 525 Foundation.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you
having
coming on,
me.
Becky. I hope this helps a lot of people. And I
do too. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on here and tell our story and just kind of bring in more awareness to what's going on in our communities. And hopefully that'll save a life, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. I thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in today. If you love this podcast, make sure you leave a review on Spotify, share it with your friends, visit my website, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Get Real with Meredith. See you next time on Guiding God's Daughters.